It's July 3rd, 2013. And so last week we talked to Webster Colcord for a bit. And this week I asked Ron Cole if he would like to come on the show and share some of his thoughts about what's going on in the world of stop motion. And so welcome to the show, Ron.
Yeah, and at first I said no, but then Marc eventually agreed to my price, and so here I am.
Luckily you're cheap, Ron. That's good. So thanks for coming on the show. We were just talking about a new project that Leica is starting to promote, and it is called Boxtrolls. And so here is the poster, and it's slated for 9/26/14. But who really knows? They always agree to dates, but let's say thereabouts it will come out, maybe before or after. And so not a lot is known about it. But they have a trailer that they released, and you can't tell from this poster, if it's computers or CG. It looks kind of like an illustration for a book. And so if you look at their video, we're going to play this and maybe get some people to give their opinions here. Let's see. See if it works.
Sometimes there's a mother. Sometimes there's a father. Sometimes there's a father and a father.
Right, so I guess they're probably putting this out in theaters as well. So Ron, what do you think about that trailer?
I think it's incredibly well done, and while I was watching it, it occurred to me that it's all one shot, which is really, to me, is a frightening thing. When you attempt to get all the way through a shot of that duration, because the one character, the one little kid, is on screen the entire time. So you've got to go into that hoping for flawlessness.
Yes, and there's a lot of lighting shifts. There's lighting changes. The atmosphere seems to change as well. They sort of
Yep.
add some kind of. I noticed in the top here of the screen, they're adding some sort of like foggy lighting effects, and I'm not even sure. And it's kind of hard to tell. I know at the end of the shot, like their eyes light up there. I'm thinking, how do they do all that? Is it, post production or?
That could be, I mean, well, that's the thing about today's world is you have those options. If you're planned to do a spotlight or coating the eyes with that 3M material to make it reflect light, if none of that's, then you hire the slave to sit and rotoscope the eyes every frame. But then again, you might be able to just tell the After Effects to follow the eyes and highlight them.
Yeah. So my first impression was it is really clean, but I also had a hard time telling at first. I had to think back. Is it stop motion or computers as well? It definitely struck me as like an illustration. The background even looks almost. I guess it's the lighting.
Yeah, I trust that that's all in front of camera. To me, that looks physical. I don't doubt that for a moment. Yeah, I mean, to me, that looks like just a stylistically painted, scenic. So they've got a really talented scenic artist.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, the characters are in close quarters with everything that's on the set, and they're going to be reflecting light, and there's going to be shadow issues. It's really not an option when you have that many things going on to not actually physically have them on the set, which is pretty amazing because I look at a scene just like this one shot and all of the things that happen, and I think, okay, tie downs. How do you deal with that? I have no freaking idea.
Yes. Yeah,
You know,
all those feet.
I've
Yes.
watched it a couple of times, and it's amazing how, for a person who does this stuff, how many times you have to watch it to catch how many impressive things that there are in it. I mean, just that shot right there with the two ladies. I
That
look at the
yeah.
character on the left, and I'm seeing all kinds of mechanical things going on under that dress.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Yep.
I mean, that was like from Coraline. There was the two overweight ladies, and there was the whole issue of how do you deal with moving a character around and give the impression that they have legs and hips and everything when the animator's actually not allowed to touch anything under that dress. Not that it's not a G-rated film, but
Exactly, yes.
you have to start to question, is the back of the dress hollow? So that the animator can reach in there, or is it being controlled from under the set, and is one of the bricks that the character's standing on removable? There are
Right.
so many things to play, and that's why I was saying at the beginning that for all of that to be done all in one shot is so much to plan in advance. You don't just make up a trailer like this spontaneously, because I'm sure lots and lots of things have to happen separately. I mean, who knows? Maybe a lot of the characters were shot separately and introduced later with some foreshadowing, but some of them had to be there. I mean, this is the thing about Leica, is that they are an all stop motion company, and so these are issues that they've mastered
Yes.
from film to film. So that's their, this is where having a director and a producer and a production team who are familiar with how the animators work is crucial. To have that many things happen and be able to to have everybody on the production all on the same page, to know
Yes.
I mean, I I can't even imagine how long did it take to shoot that trailer. That
Yeah.
that had to be days and days of work, and everybody has to be on the same page with everything that has to change in the lighting, and which characters need to come in and when, and are there several animators? I can't imagine that's the work all of one animator. So there've got to be numerous people on that set.
Yeah, that I would think the same thing also. And even like their heads as they pop out of the boxes, there's like some sort of telescoping mechanism inside
Yep.
there that I mean, and the box closes, so
Well,
they're
it's
like a turtle, you know?
yeah, it's telescoping, but it's telescoping obviously for replacement heads that need to be attached. That's the only
Yeah.
thing that frustrates me about Leica's stuff, is that they're so married to these replacement heads, which work wonderfully. But for me, I like animating my own faces,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, it's frustrating that the animators animating just the bodies, and
Yes.
opening up the box every frame and replacing it with a new head. But I mean, I certainly can't fault it, because it certainly looks fantastic.
Yeah. I know that I don't know if you were you here when Justin Rash was talking
Absolutely, I don't miss an episode.
That's right. And when you do, I do at the same time, which is kind of ironic. But he was saying that the animators actually could go to the puppet makers. The I guess they're working with ZBrush. I forget what program he said they were using, ZBrush or Maya or something. But
Right.
they were able to create faces on cue, basically. So if you wanted to have a certain expression for your shot, and your puppet is doing something really wild, and he bonks his head into a fence post or something, that you could actually like make a series of squashed heads.
Wow.
So in a
I've
way, it's kind of neat.
I've got very limited experience with replacement heads, because this style of animation isn't my visual style. Even though just recently I had a project that I worked on where I made some replacement heads, but I've never. Well, actually, no, I did animate them just as a test to make sure that they were working.
Hmm.
But like I'm saying, it's not my cup of tea. I want to grab my faces and stretch them and bend them and make them do what I need.
Yeah. Well, maybe you're a closet clay animation animator or something. Is that what it is?
No, I'm a closet cable-controlled live-action puppeteer turned stop-motion.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was the whole thing with the film in the Fall of Gravity. That was the whole reason for making it in the first place, was to get that ability to make the faces able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty astounding. It's really you're now but all your characters weren't like that. Didn't you say that your marionette was clay?
My marionette was a combination of clay and plastic, and he had replacement faces, but they never changed on camera. That was my thing with him, was that I only made him change expressions when he turned around or passed his hand over his face, to make it, because I wanted him to have the feeling of being like a porcelain doll, and so the face always has that feeling of a static sculpted face, so you never actually see it move. My motivation in that, thinking back all those years ago, was that I felt that I liked the idea that the marionette character, stylistically as a puppet, was entirely different from the other two characters. So the other two characters were you saw them moving on camera constantly, and they were rubber puppets, and I felt it would just be an interesting contrast to have the marionette be a clay character whose face you never actually saw move.
I see. Yeah.
Yet it did change expression, so you would have to catch when it had changed, because he definitely changes expressions, you just never see it happen.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting how different people view replacement faces. I know, like, Ray Harryhausen did a lot of his early stuff with replacement faces, his fairy tales, and then he sort of, I think, like, double exposed, or like turned down the exposure at the end of the shot, and then the new shot it would be also turned down, and then he'd sort of overlap them, and they'd have a almost a blurring sort of effect.
Right.
And nowadays it's just like, if you want to do faces, there's just so many ways to go about it. There's computers, printing stuff out. There's sculpting them, or just making them solid and using cables.
Right.
So
well, see, with this film, when I was able to animate the faces, to me, I felt like that was so much a part of the performance, where I'm getting to be that character. I'm getting, even all of the dialogue is pre-recorded, and I'm following a script. I'm still able to embellish my own take on what the expression should look like during that, where I feel with replacement animation, you're kind of a slave to the faces that are in the box.
that makes sense.
Which again, it's not something that I object to. It's just that if I'm the one making the film, I'm going to move the face myself.
Right. Yes. It's like the ultimate control, really.
But it's all look and style. Quite frankly, the kinds of things that you can do with the expressions on the characters that are the Leica style, I could not do with my method, because they're able to get more into like the world of 2D animated characters, where you can do expression changes that are just impossible, literally impossible to do with a physical head.
Yeah. And see, that used to be only able to be done in like clay animation, or like the Pillsbury Doughboy, where they
Right.
cast them in wax, and stretch
Right.
them out and everything. So,
Well, that was my first experience with replacement animation heads when I worked at a place called Broadcast Arts. I think we did one of the very last Pillsbury Doughboy ads.
oh, you did.
Yeah, and Ralph Cordero was making gazillions of these head casts, and we were sculpting new faces on them and sanding them like crazy. And there were so many of those heads, and those were all handmade. No digital printing at that time.
Right. Yeah. And I recently saw a Doughboy commercial, but it was for Geico. Have you seen that one?
No.
Uh,
Oh,
I
now I feel guilty because I just on Facebook I killed the Geico lizard.
I saw that. Yes, with the Mustang. Yes. But it's like a parody, I guess. I can't remember what they say, but they basically make fun of the Doughboy, and Like
Oh,
why is the doughboy so happy, when you press his belly, and they're like, oh, because he saved, a bunch of money by switching to Geico, or something silly like that. But at first you think it's a doughboy commercial, so they kind of fool you. Yeah, but I guess I don't know. Do they even still have Doughboy commercials, like actually for the Pillsbury Doughboy, for their
yeah,
products?
yeah. Not that I watch a whole lot of TV, but I know I've seen, but they're all CGI now.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely computers, like the commercial, which is
Yeah.
sad. Rest in peace, Pillsbury Doughboy.
Oh, I still have one of the heads.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, I think everybody I mean, because there's so many of them, and when Ralph was casting them, sometimes there would be rejected casting because of air bubbles or something, and I think everybody who works on one of those ads swipes one at some point. You have to. It's the Pillsbury Doughboy. You have to come.
Yeah. Well, that's neat. So, well, let's see. Well, let's talk about what do you think is the future of? Because yeah, I know you and Peter Montgomery and other people have been talking more about the more or less the Ray Harryhausen style of animation coming back. And I know the last time we talked, I think we talked about the Sinbad film that was gonna come out, I guess, several times this year.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's always being pushed back. So what do you think about, because we're talking about technology and replacement faces and all that kind of stuff. What do you think about the future of like Dynamation?
I'm really, really confident, probably more confident now than I've ever been, that it really is going to make a significant return in independent film.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I've been busy working on stuff, and I have been so busy in the past couple of years that I haven't had a chance to update my resume or even advertise myself, but people have been finding me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked on a film called The Legend of the Golden Fish Cake, which a number of other guys have also done stop motion for, which is also a live action stop motion mix. Then there's Peter Montgomery stuff, and he's making the Omega device now. And I recently got in touch with Timothy Hines, who did that documentary remake version thing of the War of the Worlds, which also has all stop motion in it. And he's talked to me about one of his next films is also going to have, towards the end of the film, a significant amount of stop motion mixed in. And I with all of this going on, people are starting to wake up to it. They're starting to wake up to the fact that what we can do looks real because it is real. It does not have the price tag of CGI, and it can be done on a medium to low budget film. Mm-hmm. And I mean, granted, most of the stuff that I've worked on in the past few years has been for little or no money, but that's why I did it. Because I know that even people who are experienced in the film industry, if they're not experienced with this technique and they've grown up in a world of thinking that it's all done with CGI now, they need to be shown. And so I personally, as well as others, have needed to develop an animation reel to go to them and show them, no, look, it's not 1965 anymore, and stop motion does not look like that anymore.
Exactly.
And all the stuff that I've been doing in the past few weeks, just animating that pterodactyl there with the puppet that Peter Montgomery built and sent me, and I've been animating it and sending it back to, sending finished shots back to him, and he's been composite. It is amazing how fast that guy composites.
I noticed that. It seems like every day there's like 3 more shots on his Facebook wall.
I mean, I send him animation that's just the raw animation against the green screen, and within hours, he's got a finished shot compiled with sound effects and music posted, which is such a great selling point. I mean, when we start pitching this to independent, the independent film producers that are out there, that's one of the selling points is that, this is a really quick turnaround. So, so much for the fanfare of, oh, well, in CGI, you can change the camera angles and all of that stuff. Stop motion is now at that point where we can be just as effective and just as fast.
And if you were to shoot a shot like your pterodactyl scene here with let's say 3 cameras at different angles,
Absolutely.
you can change the angles. So it's actually
Yeah,
not even off the table.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't reveal this, but when I spoke to Timothy Hines about his work on War of the Worlds, he told me that he shot coverage on his war machines, and there are times where you think you're seeing new animation, but it's just a replay of other, older, similar shots from different angles. So you can have that, the ability to change your mind about where the camera is.
That's great. And that's not even really, something that would be surprising as a technique to use. Maybe it's a secret. Maybe we just gave away a trade secret there. But, it's really, it just makes sense.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and Peter definitely does a good job of blending, the color temperature and the lighting and everything in his shots. Oh, I noticed that this rock over here. Oh, I see. I guess that rock is moving because he's zooming in. I just noticed it when it cut back. But,
Yeah, it's a dolly kind of an effect, which I absolutely love. It's like the clouds moving in the background. They don't move very much, but subliminally you get that. The scene feels alive, because if that background were just a static background, you would notice that.
yeah.
It's not a still frame. The rock, and you're panning past the rock in the foreground. The clouds in the background are real clouds, and so you definitely perceive over the duration. I mean, how long is that shot? It's only a few seconds long, but from beginning to end, the clouds have significantly moved. And like I said, it's one of those things that you don't consciously say, "Oh, wow, look, that cloud is moving," but you just know it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's the
very,
kind of,
very subtle.
it's like our page on Facebook is 21st Century Stop Motion, and that's the kind of thing that we need to think about when we're thinking 21st Century Stop Motion. We really need to compete with the CGI world, and that's stuff that happens in the CGI world, and we have to do it. We can't get away with a locked off camera anymore.
Sure. So how do you tackle or is it all done in post production now for different camera angles or
Yeah, that's the biggest difference from Harryhausen's Dynamation, because Harryhausen always had to build a portion of the set.
Mm-hmm.
And you had your rear screen projection, where now going through all the way through shooting all my stuff for Sinbad and for Legend of the Golden Fish Cake, I've never built a portion of the set, because now I can shoot the puppets just against the green screen, and I've invented all sorts of different techniques for inventing the shadows to fall and appear as though he's standing actually on a set. When it have to, because the digital tools are just wonderful for that. You can take the silhouette of your character and bend it into a new shape to create a shadow, or you can 2D animate it or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of options to play with. Certainly, I think building a portion of the set is certainly something I wouldn't say no to. But when you're working on a hyphenated budget, not having to have anything other than the puppet at all is the cheapest option.
Right. And so most of the background plates are just shot live, and so instead of like where in Dynamation you would have a rear screen projector,
Right.
And a screen like a 3M Scotch, is it like, what do they call those again?
Scotchlight.
Scotchlight, yes. So you're sort of dealing with all those really, everything is locked down to to your
Yeah.
studio floor, maybe
I can tell
bolted
you,
or.
I can tell you that on Sinbad, I have no idea what the setting is going to look like where the Cyclops crab battle takes place. Everything that I shot, the director had sent me a rough cut of the movie, and he had some generic background that he kind of photoshopped, doctored, but we really didn't know what that environment was going to look like.
Uh huh.
And so I took those images, put them in Photoshop, created a lot of different camera angles on those backgrounds, and just used those because, just for sanity's sake, while I'm shooting, I need to visualize a camera angle.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing that was really being generated there was the stop motion, and the background for those scenes are all going to be created digitally, as a 3D environment. And I personally, I have no idea what that's going to look like. I'll be as interested as everyone else to see where those characters are actually fighting.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that some of the previews for the Sinbad film seemed like they're really rough.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, the shots that have been put out publicly so far have been really just rough cuts, temporary backgrounds, because all that stuff is still in progress.
Sure. So I know what camera you use, but can you tell everybody like what is your setup? What do you use for your animation? What is your workflow? Do you just use a camera and then everything is magically transformed into animation? Dumb question, I know, but just for the beginners.
I am well. My advice wouldn't be anything that anybody's done any animation so far wouldn't be familiar with already, because I shoot so basically. I mean, I'm shooting right now. I'm shooting against green screen. I usually shoot front light, backlight, which requires a bit of an explanation, but it's just a different background where I'm taking one frame with a light background, one frame of a dark background, and that gets composited. But really, there's nothing extraordinary about the way I'm shooting. The only thing that's probably unique about the way that I work is that when I need to see a character's feet in a shot,
Mm-hmm.
and they're walking on a background that's not actually there, I had to come up with a new way of making them walk on a solid surface that isn't there. Because when you're shooting either green screen or front light backlight, you're dealing with tie downs that are, if I'm shooting green screen, then it would be a cyclone background, which is for anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's that your background is sloped, so that you've got a flat green background and then it curves down and becomes the floor, and you don't want to be drilling tie down holes into that surface. So how do you have, because if you have a tabletop, then the tabletop's going to be in the image, and you would have to cut out that surface later in post-production, which would be a nightmare. So my creative solution is that all my stop motion puppets walk on stilts. What I have is I have a frame that's just 3 pieces of wood, which is a top and 2 sides that I can position, and that has the equivalent of tie down holes drilled in it, and then I have these wooden dowels with a hole drilled through the center. And I put a tie-down screw, a long tie-down screw, up through that wood dowel, and that's what my character stands on.
Wow, that's interesting.
So if you were to see my animation without any of the post-production, you would see it looks like they're tiptoeing on top of these stilts, that they're just walking on top of these posts. And the reason why that works out is because then in post-production, the only thing that I need to go in and rotoscope out and create mats for are those posts. So if they're in front of a green screen or in front of a front light backlight, that's all there. So I can have them as high up in the shot as I want, and the only thing that I need to get rid of in post-production. So it's the equivalent of having a character on a flying rig, only the flying rig is always under their feet.
Interesting. So what about like stairs, or let's say like a character is on unlevel ground, just use like a shorter wooden dowel. Is that what you
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I use as long a wooden dowel as I can because I mean, it's um, that way I'm not changing the different heights of the different screws, and I have a lot to keep track of. I just, I suppose I'm single-minded in that way. That if I always work with the tallest possible posts, just so that I don't have to change.
I see.
Um,
So
and
were there many shots that you had to do where you could see their feet?
Yeah, lots of them. That's why I came up with that technique. In
Oh,
the
okay.
beginning, I remember very early on, I was drilling holes through some clear plexiglass and making the puppets walk on top of that. But I was going to go through tons of plexiglass with all these drilled holes in them.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, so that was kind of a fail idea, especially because, plexiglass is kind of flexible, so it's not really a stable surface, and I'm going to get fingerprints and goop all over it and everything anyway. So,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah, that would be a pain in the butt.
once I got used to just having the characters, I got used to having them walk on the elevated tie downs. That just became a standard that I just got so used to. It works. And I've got a scene in Sinbad where the six-armed statue is walking up a flight of stairs chasing after Sinbad. And yeah, it was just the tie downs were always the same length. I just because it's the tie downs on top of a base, because I need to be able to get my hands under it to get to the heads of the screws. So I just changed the height of the base that it was walking. I mean, I understand it's kind of hard to imagine describing a visual like that, but
No, that's perfectly clear. Yeah, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
yeah, like I said, it was really awkward in the beginning of like, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is nuts. But I got used to it really quick because it just works. It wasn't a complicated thing to deal with, and it allowed me to forget about where the edge of the mat line is, and forget about gosh, how am I going to get rid of all of these tie down holes drilled in the green screen, and I could just focus on animating.
Sure. And I guess it kind of gives more flexibility. Like if with your spider, his rear legs could go behind a rock or something, and they can just add like a rock like up
Well,
above.
he was tough because he just has pointed tips to his feet,
Hmm.
and I avoided seeing the tips of his feet hitting the ground as much as I possibly could. But on the rare occasions where I could see them, he actually has a strong piece of armature wire in his belly, and he's
Oh,
not
okay.
actually he's not actually supported by his legs at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it was just the center of his body was just so much weight, and I really needed to be able to control the rocking motion of the center of the body as much as possible.
Hmm.
So that's the thing that I focused on having tied down, and not the legs, because the legs are constantly picking up and moving around. So that's where the flexibility was.
Awesome. So,
Where I didn't have to focus on worrying about those. I had one shot where I was seeing him from above, and I had to actually make him walk on a green screen, totally supported on his own weight on his legs, and that took me forever to animate because
yeah.
he's only got four legs, so every time you lift one of the legs, the other three legs better be in a good position to maintain his weight, or else it's just going to fall over.
Absolutely. Yeah. That would be
because
hard.
because for the whole duration of it, he was the proverbial three-legged stool.
Yes. Yes.
But it was just for one shot where I had to deal with that nightmare, and if I had to deal with it over again, that would have required a reshoot. But I had very few reshoots through that whole thing.
That's good. And so, when you light your stuff, how did you guys plan for the lighting? What is there a specific thing you had to do? Just
Nothing, I get away with murder. Because I'm not a lighting guy, and I've got regular house lights, I've got my clip-up lights, and I've got a bunch of gels that I've collected over the years, which I rarely use. I'm usually just I've usually just got something to some kind of translucent screen in front of the light to diffuse it if that's necessary. But I'm just doing general lighting, whatever looks good to me. Fortunately, in Sinbad, most of the scenes that I had to copy the lighting for had very harsh lighting, so I just had to make it look like it was coming from the right direction.
I see.
But really, I'm not. Well, one of the benefits, again, back to the digital and the post-production, that's one of the beauty things about today's world, where you can change so much about the lighting in post-production. Where if you're shooting large frames, if you want to throw more light into places that look like they're totally in shadow, if you've shot raw files, you can put light in there and you can change the color temperature and even the type of color that's in the highlights versus the shadows, and kind of fake your way through all that stuff. I mean, I look at stuff, even just the stuff that Peter's composited on this project with the pterodactyl, and the lighting that he ends up with in the finished product it bears very little resemblance to what I actually shoot with.
Huh.
Because he's able to go in post-production and tweak the colors to match the background, and the only thing that I really need to pay attention to is where's the light coming from in general, but
Yeah.
so much of that.
So one of the questions in the chat room is how many frames per second were you shooting your animation for this project?
I live and die by 24 frames a second. It's it's been the standard forever. I rarely, if ever, deviate from that.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? If anybody has any questions for Ron, let's see if we can answer some. So how long did it take you guys to animate or to complete your shots for Sinbad?
Well, that's where Nick Hilligoss has me beat by a mile. That guy animates at light speed compared to me. If I had to guess at an average, I'm happy if I shoot 2 seconds in a day.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty fast.
A lot, I mean, but the only thing I have in most cases to focus on is just the puppet. So, I should be able to animate faster than that, and sometimes I do. But I mean, today I shot 100 frames.
Wow, that's great.
But I'm just it's the pterodactyl stuff, so it's just wings flapping. It's not a whole lot to do. But when it's full body character animation. And when the animation has to be realistic, I spend so much time at the frame grabber, toggling back and forth, looking at each and every part of the body,
mm-hmm.
and I almost never move the puppet, go check the frame grabber, and shoot the frame. I almost always am back and forth between the puppet and the frame grabber 3 and 4 times, changing something. And that's the beauty of the frame grabber. That's that you can make sure that you're getting everything and catching every pop.
Sure.
Because
and you're using Dragon frame for
that?
Okay.
Yep.
Now JP2 George, I think that's his name, is saying motion blur. How does Ron do it?
I don't do it. Peter does it. Peter does it, and on Sinbad, Paul McConaughey did all the motion blurs on that stuff. No, I don't have the software. I wish I did.
Okay, well, let's see.
I have done some motion blur in Photoshop on some shots that I did myself every once in a while, and In the Fall of Gravity, that was all on print film, and sometimes I hand painted motion blurs into the film, but that was before the digital world existed for me.
Sure. So what is like your favorite program to use outside of Dragon for stop motion? Is there a specific one you use a lot?
Well, Dragon is the mainstay now. Before that, I was using, what was the, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. Frame Thief. I was using Frame Thief, but I think that's been discontinued.
Yeah, I don't think it's been updated in years.
Yeah, I think when PowerPC switched over to Intel, they never made the upgrade.
Oh, okay. Now Peter is saying, Mark, feel free to ask me. I'm here. So yeah, Peter, if you want to explain any particular process, I don't know if Skype can do two calls at once. I think I asked Peter once to call Skype and he declined. Maybe you know what, Peter, if you should come
Peter,
on next week.
absolutely, Peter. Definitely, you should definitely be a guest.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, Peter has so many tricks up his sleeve and has been doing stop motion for so many years. It would be really fun.
No, Peter doesn't use real smart motion blur. Peter uses a motion blur technique that he came up with himself, I believe, and it works incredibly. I've been looking through all of the stuff that he's blurred on my stuff, frame by frame, and it seems to at times work better than real smart motion blur. Because Peter, I got to tell you, I've been looking at the stuff you've blurred with the pterodactyl stuff, and the blurring that you've been doing on the wings has worked better has worked better than real smart motion blur I've seen on other shots with characters with wings. It doesn't seem to be able to keep up with, because the thing is, the software has to recognize what's changing from frame to frame. And if a puppet's wings move too quickly, and it's in a whole different position from one frame to the next, it doesn't know that that's the same object.
I'm gonna take a guess that it has to do with being able to manipulate keyframes. I think Webster said last week that with that program in After Effects, you can actually narrow stuff down to like groups of frames and change the amount of blur.
Well, I know from when Paul McConaughey was doing the motion blurring on Sinbad, he learned all of the tools that are in Real Smart Motion Blur for, it's kind of like if you've ever worked with a photographic morphing program where you put marks on one picture to the next to let the software know what's moving.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that with Real Smart Motion Blur, but I don't know if Peter's doing any of that stuff. So he definitely needs to come on as a guest. Because whatever it is that he's doing, it just works. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I don't know if it matters. Maybe it should be a secret as well, at least for the time being, until somebody can come up with.
Yeah, he's been kind of tight-lipped about it over time. Although I remember when I first met Peter, he did explain it once, but I think that whole thread got deleted.
Oh, did it? Yeah.
I'm not sure. I kind of remember that he explained it once, and then I think he regretted it and got rid of it. Trade secrets are kind of. I've got a trade secret of my own. There are those little things that you don't want to give away, because if somebody at Leica wants a character with a rubber face to pronounce the letter O properly, they're going to have to call me.
Well, can they bribe you? That's the question.
Yeah. Paycheck, yes.
That will do it. So Peter he made mention. He said, "Well, I'll tell you, Mark. This blur of mine is set to." Okay, can I do it in a British accent? I guess not, but he says it's set to the exact point whereby it knows how much blur to add to any moving part of the puppet without tweaking. So it sounds like he does it for the whole shot without having to keyframe it. If I understand correctly, that's pretty amazing.
There might be an advantage, though, to the fact that most everything that I've shot for Peter, and I think even his own stuff, is shot almost entirely against green screen. And so I guess the software, I hate to say a computer knows something, because it doesn't know anything. It's a stupid machine, but it's able to keep track of what's moving maybe more simply because there's nothing else distracting it. So it might be different if the puppet were actually on a set.
Sure.
Where there's lots of stuff to look at.
Yeah, I think that was the problem I had when I tested it out many years ago with replacement faces, was that if things don't move properly from one frame to the next, if there's too big of a difference, it'll just sort of like jumble up the.
Yeah, but then again, Peter did apply motion blur to a number of sequences that Harryhausen shot. And that's all got all the backgrounds already there, and it still works.
Let me see if I can bring one of those shots up here.
Yeah, I cannot stop watching the scene from Guanji that he put the motion blur on. That is just, to me, astonishing on so many levels, because you watch Harryhausen's original animation and it's stunning to begin with, and Ray is really talented, but on fast moves you still see a certain amount of strobing, and you don't know, is that a flaw or whatever, but once the motion blur is applied, it is clearly the clearest testament that you'll ever see of letting you know that no, Harryhausen really was animating that freaking good. Because when the motion blur is applied, it now looks, I mean, I don't know what, maybe I'm hypersensitive Harryhausen fan, but to me it's comparable to CGI, where it just has that level of smoothness. There was no clickiness to Harryhausen stuff. It just didn't have a motion blur, and that's the only reason you see any strobe.
Yeah. Let me see here. So I think Peter just created this. I'm probably in the wrong place here. Let's see. I can't find it. Peter, if you have your Valley of Guanji video, let me see here. Oh, your page is off at the moment, he says. Okay, so we can't see it, Ron. I'm sorry.
Oh gosh, and the animation that I did of a Minotaur for Legend of the Golden Fish Cake. I have a scene where this Minotaur is running down a street, and Peter didn't do the official compositing for the film, but I really desperately wanted to see it with the motion blur, and Peter was nice enough to do a composite of that shot for me, and he added a camera move and stuff, and it's like, wow, I animated that? That looks freaking cool.
Yeah. Well, there's something about motion blur. I mean, sometimes it looks great. Sometimes, I think Ray Harryhausen, I'm trying to think if he used many motion blurs in his work.
Well, I've been told that Ray did have a motion blur technique, but it was used extremely rarely, and I don't know. I can't name a scene that he used it in.
Yeah.
But I know somebody who knew Ray, and they claim to know that he did have a technique, and it was a laborious thing, but he did use it on something, but again, tight-lipped, so I don't know the secrets.
Yeah. Well, the only shot that I can think of would be where Mighty Joe Young goes and pushes over the lion in the cage. I think the wheels on that were spun with a drill or something, and to give it blur, if I remember.
Right.
But I'm trying to think. I can't think of any shots with motion blur. But yeah, I think I'm not really sure if he would use it or not.
Well, when Ray was, at the height of his career, he was all there was. And when the world was watching his animation at that time, nobody thought, oh, there's no motion blur there. Because, people's eyes become more educated over the decades. It's like when I was a kid and I watched the special effects of the Enterprise on the original 1960s Star Trek, that looked as real to me as, NASA footage. But, as decades move on and special effects improve, you get used to a higher standard. And so when you look back, you start to recognize what the flaws were with, but you really can't call them flaws. They were state of the art at the time.
Yeah. So it's like people were scared of King Kong. They got really they fainted at the they were fainting and everything inside the theaters.
I was growing up when I watched the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad when I was, 9 and 10 years old. That was as real could be, and of course I still watch it with the heart of a 9-year-old, and I still see it that way. But I can clearly see what isn't there now.
Sure. So what do you think the future holds? Do you think there's anything beyond what you guys have started? You think there's anything?
Absolutely. Like I said, John O'Lone, who made the War of the Worlds thing, he's planning a film and is definitely married to the idea. of doing. I'll be doing, if that film happens, and he swears that it is, it's going to have a climactic ending with a bunch of robot stuff. So it sort of falls under the category of a RoboCop, Terminator kind of feeling film that he described to me. And the Legend of the Golden Fish Cake thing was something that came up completely independent of any urging of mine. That was another filmmaker recognizing that, yes, stop motion is ready for this now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we finally have enough of this animation assembled together into a reel, and we can start pitching to independent film producers online and in person or whatever, and really start selling this, it'll be irresistible, because it doesn't carry the cost of CG, and it has a romance all its own. It has everything that we love about it, and a good price tag. I mean, we can definitely see a resurgence, and I mean, for me personally, it's my only focus at the moment. I'll take any work that comes my way to make money, but really my priority and main focus for the past few years has been this resurgence of Dynamation style animation.
Sure. And I know I probably mentioned this before, but I always wondered why, when Dennis Muren and Phil Tippett were, in separate studios, and Dennis Muren for Jurassic Park decided to go with, CG models that were motion blurred. I always wondered what would have happened if Dennis Muren and Phil Tippett worked together and actually blurred, like what Peter is doing today, the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park.
It endlessly frustrates me, and I'm so thrilled that Phil in the past year has finally decided to come out and express his frustration to the world. And I got to meet him just recently at a screening that he had here in New York, and he showed a lot of the stuff from Mad God, and it's not that type of realistic animation, although it has a realistic edge to it. But I spoke to him for a little while and told him about the Sinbad stuff and
modern stop motion, and I said, well, why don't you do that in computers in post today? And he's like, and his answer was like, you mean like Go Motion? Like kind of hinting like, that's the way it's done. And I guess part of it is that he's also proud of his work with Go Motion, and maybe there's reluctance to kind of, I don't know, maybe it takes something away, or I don't know, but I sense the same thing, like he's not really into it.
I don't think that we can deny that he's a person who can obviously transform his techniques to adapt to a changing business, because that was the reason why I almost hated him for years, because I thought he was the one responsible for the coming of CGI, and I felt betrayed by him. I remember when I even told him this when I met him, that I said to him, when I saw the promo that you were doing stop motion in Mad God, I said, I think people blocks away from my house heard me scream. And he smiled. Phil is back to stop motion. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It really is.
Yeah.
And I hope there's more of that in the future after Mad God, because I know it's more or less, it seems like a side project for him where he's just got some interns, and I don't know if I guess it's hands-on for him, right? Is it pretty much hands-on?
Yeah, he's certainly physically part of it and working on it, but I mean, he's got Tippett Studios to run. I think that he had reached a point once the business moved over to being CGI. I think he resigned himself to the position of director, producer kind of role, where he wasn't going to physically do it anymore. And I think Mad God dragged him back in, because he's still an artist at heart, and that makes him want to do it, and he is doing it. So, I mean, he explained that the plan with Mad God is that they've been doing 3 first episodes of it. It'll be a series, but he really has no plans on where it goes after that. it just is what it is. And if people fall in love with it, they'll make tons more. And if people don't fall in love with it, then it'll be just whatever it is and move on. So, he's having fun having an indie producer kind of project, and, hope it becomes something and just see where it goes.
Yeah. That's my sister. I'm gonna call her back later. She wants me to draw a caricature of somebody and get charge somebody for it, but I don't draw. I don't know what she's thinking.
I draw.
Do you draw? All right,
No.
I'm gonna give her your phone number.
Oh, but just like my animation, I'm a realistic kind of a guy. I'm not a caricature guy.
Yeah. Well, I think that the future to me seems really bright. Like I was saying, I think a couple of weeks ago, just with what they have on your iPhones, the applications that are free to do stop motion on are numerous.
Right.
So it's just so accessible now, and technology and the cost of things are coming down really, really low in price.
And to me, that is the selling point. That is what every independent film producer wants to hear. They want to hear the combination of, can I do this kind of special effect? Can I have this monster? Answer yes. Can you do it on this budget? Yes, we can. And I don't think that CGI is cheap enough yet to do it as realistically as we can on an independent film budget. I honestly don't. I mean, I've seen some very realistic stuff done for independent film, but quite frankly, I've seen some big budgeted CGI that doesn't look like it really physically exists. It's just that's the ace in the hole that stop motion Dynamation has, is that the puppets are real, and if the talent behind it is a good animator, then it's gonna have a screen presence that feels like it belongs there.
So, are you trying to say you don't like the digital Jabba the Hutt?
Oh God!
Is that what you're saying?
Oh, the one that briefly appeared in episode 1 was the only one that kind of sold as looking physically real. But oh my God, that first one! Don't even remind me of it. I get sick.
As Han Solo steps on his tail, it looks so completely fake. Well, there's Peter. Peter is actually, it's kind of funny how Peter is like a Ray Harryhausen type, but he's also an actor.
Yeah,
it's like he's got one up on Ray Harryhausen in that regard.
Yeah, I don't think Ray's ever been in any of his own films.
Yeah. Well, let me see here. There was a article I read here. An article. I'm gonna try to find it on a camera, and let me see if I can find it. And they were saying that it's so unbelievably cheap, with such awesome quality. Where is that? Gadgets, I think.
Okay, while you're searching for that, I want to say that something to everybody in the chat room. As somebody who always is in the chat room, we often wonder why the people who are on the show are not reading the comments and responding to the things we're asking. And I can tell you, as being the guest of the show, I have an almost impossible time trying to read the comments and have a conversation with Marc. So trust me, that's why, because when I'm watching the show and I'm in the chat room, I'm asking a question to you guys like 3 and 4 times, and I wonder why nobody's reading these comments and responding. And as a guest now, I can tell you, I now know why.
Yes.
Because it really is difficult to read and not detach from the thing that you're trying to say, or listening to, like, Marc. When Marc is asking me a question, it's, I can't, my brain doesn't go to the, 2 different places at once.
Exactly. And when they ask questions, I don't want to cut you off and say, wait, Ron, I got to ask you a question.
Right.
But yeah, it's, I wanted to just bring up really quickly, there's this new Canon 70D DSLR, which, this is being touted as an indie filmmaker's dream camera. And I don't know much about this, if it works for stop motion just yet. But I was thinking, all these cameras are constantly getting updated in quality and lower price.
Well,
And
I'm sure it'll be fine for shooting stop motion. The only question that's outstanding is whether or not it's compatible with Dragon. You know, that's the only
yes,
thing you ever really have to worry about. But that'd be a separate camera anyway. You know, like the camera that you're using for stop motion is generally going to stay in the studio. I guess unless you're working on a budget. But yeah, I mean, if what you're saying is for shooting the live action,
mm-hmm.
the cameras that are out there now, you don't, to make a feature film, you don't need anything more than like what you've got on screen there. There are so many cameras that you can shoot a feature film with.
Yeah, and this one here is, I guess, like as a full kit, is about $1,549.
Wow.
So just imagine, like, if you start a Kickstarter project and you raise money,
Yeah.
like I think for like a Mitchell camera way back in the '90s was like $20,000 or
Oh
something,
yeah.
you know. So this is really just amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's the what you need today is talent. You know, that's the one thing that I can say so positively about the technology that I once hated
mhm.
is that now it really is the thing that showcases the talent. Because, you know, because the camera is that affordable and the stop motion software is that affordable and you can get the equivalent of Photoshop for free, and if you don't know how to use it, you know somebody who does. My point is the expense of the equipment is now gone. And so you need the budget for making some puppets, which can be expensive, but it's not necessarily backbreaking. You know,
Yeah.
people on a modest budget, if they've got talent, can make a freaking fantastic film worth selling.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of like the armature kits that we sell on our website are suitable for a lot of people. Just
Absolutely.
instead of buying like a CNC machine and learning engineering and how to cut a piece of brass stock or something for your parts, you can buy kits. You can buy cameras from Best Buy.
Well, you
Uh,
know, that's where I love the idea of the community as well. You don't have to be the jack of all trades because you know people who are in the same position you are. And I love asking, Dave Hedemer to make armature parts for me when I can afford to pay him something. And he's definitely a dynamite stop motion, armature guy. But like I was saying before, that I wish that I had the software for doing all the post-production stuff. But in a sense, I almost don't, because I don't want to be the person who does everything. I love the fact that there are people like Peter and Paul who really know how to master that kind of thing, that I don't need to step out of my puppet animation zone to have to learn that whole side of the business. I don't necessarily want to be the lighting guy or the director or the writer, because there's a lot of people in this business who are hungry and need jobs. I don't want to have to do everything. And it's a bad idea to do everything because you can't. Even if you do know how to do it all, it's not the best idea to do an entire production on your own because it's too much work. You need to be in your zone to do your part, do the part that you really know how to do the best.
yeah, I completely agree. A lot of people when they start out, when I started out, I had storyboarded a 20-minute short film of a couple of squirrels who live in a forest, and they had this bug problem, and these bugs want to eat their acorns and stuff. It was really cool, and after about maybe 6 months, I gave up because it was just impossible to do by myself. And I think that's the thing that most people don't understand when they start out, is how difficult doing everything by yourself is. I mean,
Right, and everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. I've written a feature film script, and because I've done that, I know that yes, I can do that. But should I be the person who does it? No, not really. It's really better to find somebody. I just recently got in touch with somebody who's a decent script writer, because I have a story in mind that I've been developing over time, and I think really could be developed into a really fun film. Can I write it myself? Yeah. Should I? Probably not. You know, I mean, and even just from the point of view of having objectivity. You know, if I write the script myself, I'm going to love it. It doesn't mean it's going to be any good. It just means that, of course, I'm going to like whatever I wrote because I wrote it. It's a
Sure.
better idea to have other people to bounce off of each other, to give each other criticism and say, you know, make suggestions of what could be better and point out the parts that are bad that, you know, you don't know are bad because you did them. You know?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, that's how it is even with my own sculptures. A lot of times I ask people what they think,
Right,
and you don't see after you're staring at something for hours on end that, oh, this side of the face is 2 inches lower than the right side and
right,
so forth. You just don't see it.
right. For sculpture, you can look at your stuff every once in a while in a mirror, and that'll give you a different perspective on it. But you even get used to doing that. But there's no better mirror than someone else's eyes.
Yeah, I agree. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand. So,
Yeah.
does anybody else have any more questions for
And so,
Ron?
some people can't, you know. I mean, to be in this business, you got to be able to take criticism because sometimes you are wrong. You know?
Yes. That is possible. That is possible. But yeah, if anybody has any questions for Ron, just go ahead and ask. Metal Mad Cat is saying, "Why is he always wearing a suit? Is this some kind of James Bond?" Referring to
Yep.
Peter.
Yes, Peter is a very James Bond type of. Definitely but he's a Bond bad guy.
Yes. So JP2 George is asking, what about high frame rates? What do you think about, like, let's say animating? Because I know, like, uh, what's his name? Peter. See, now I'm thinking of Peter Montgomery. Peter Jackson.
Right.
He was shooting, I think, at 48 frames per second.
To me for live action that's pointless. I don't see the point to it, and from what I understand, nobody liked his 48 frames a second. But with regard to animation,
Mm-hmm.
I think there could be a place for it. As a matter of fact, one of the shots in my film "In the Fall of Gravity" is actually double the amount of frames. I didn't intend for it to be that way,
Mm-hmm.
but I shot it, and I realized that I had been making a mistake. I was animating my marionette character the same way I was animating the supposedly life-size animation characters, and I realized later that a smaller puppet type of character actually should be moving faster.
Uh-huh.
And so I took the stuff that I had already shot and I played it at double speed, and I ended up liking it so much more that that's what you're actually seeing.
Oh, okay. And
Right.
so he's asking, so Ron shoots 48 frames per second on twos, on fours? What?
Oh no, no, I would never. I did it unintentionally. Um, you know, it's hard to say that I would ever do it on purpose to shoot double the frame rate, especially now that we have motion blur. And you know, I mean, it's the economy of time. It's going to take double the time to shoot that number of frames. And if you've got the ability to add motion blur, there really isn't a purpose to doing that. And actually, I've learned when on the rare occasions when I actually have shot a higher frame rate, there's actually the more frames you shoot, the more chances of making mistakes you have. So, you know, it might sound like a kind of a cool idea to shoot at 60 frames a second, but when you realize that that doubles the amount of mistakes that you will make, it's
Mhm.
not such a good idea.
Yeah.
Because we all make mistakes. None of our animation is flawless. And you're going to have twice as many mistakes with twice as many frames. So I wouldn't go there on purpose.
So Nick is asking, like, are we seeing both frames or just one, as if it's shot on 24? Like, are there frames being dropped?
No, I've never dropped any frames. The thing was with my In the Fall of Gravity, at that time, I was all analog, and so when I did the final composite on the film, there was no such thing as motion blur, but I added a quasi fake motion blur to the whole film by doing frame layering, I think it's called, where each frame is sort of fading in and fading out. So there's no actual blur, but you're seeing a fade in, fade out.
Okay.
And so with the marionette footage, I didn't have to double up the frames because the frames were already there to use. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, does that answer your question, Nick? And here's the shot. So yeah, I always looked at this and wondered how you did that because it looks different.
If you still frame anything that's moving fast in the film, you'll see like a ghost image behind it.
Okay, I'm gonna
Where
wait.
you'll see like a ghost of the previous frame, and that's there on purpose because it makes the animation feel just a little bit smoother.
Let me see if I can freeze frame it here. It's gotta time it just perfectly. Let's see, and
No, see, that's one of my painted motion blurs.
oh, that is. Oh, okay.
my hand painted motion blur.
How
I did
about how about when he comes down here? Oh, like
yes.
here. Is that?
Oh, yeah, you had it there.
Ah, okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's one of the most unique stop motion.
No, that's my hand painted motion blurs.
Including this part also, as he's falling back?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah.
I would choose the only hand motion blur in the whole film, right?
Well, it's all with the marionette. Yeah, see, all of that stuff is I had acrylic paint and I was smearing it on the frames to stretch out the colors. Yeah, with the marionette, I didn't do that with either the wizard or the troll character, but with the marionette, there is so much painted in those frames. Like the cuffs on his sleeves
Yeah.
are all hand painted in. The ones in this shot right here, those are clay. But in most cases, when he's standing up, when he's standing up and moving around doing his performance, the cuffs on his ankles and on his wrists are all painted onto the frames.
Oh, okay. So you can get sort of that flowing motion.
Yeah. Yeah, see, all right there, those are all hand painted in.
Oh, okay. You did a good job with the colors, but you're a
Yeah,
painter, so you have that. You
Yeah,
already have
well,
that.
I was an illustrator first before I was any other kind of artist.
That's great.
Yeah, because especially in this shot, I knew in this shot there's so much moving really fast. And I tried keeping clay sleeves attached to his skinny arms and they just kept falling off. So I just decided, since I was shooting the whole thing on flat paper prints, I would just hand paint all that stuff in. I shouldn't say just, I suppose.
No, that's really great.
Because it was not easy. That was a lot of time spent painting.
All right. Well, I guess let's see. It's about 9:16 already. Wow.
Yeah.
Time has flown. All right. Well, I guess what we should do is wrap up the show because my parents are going to be back with my son. They're babysitting him. So, Ron, thanks for coming on the show and
Thanks.
talking it up.
It's always fun being on the show.